The massive alien ship appeared without warning at the edge of the solar system. It hung silently against the backdrop of stars, its strange design unlike anything humans had ever built. The vessel was shaped like a giant arrowhead, smooth and black, with pulsing blue lights running along its hull. Lieutenant Commander Allison Hayes stood on the bridge of the United Earth Defense Force flagship Intrepid, staring at the image on the main screen. She had been in space for 15 years, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. "Any change in their position?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Navigation Officer Keith Daniels shook his head. "No, Commander. They've been holding the same orbit for the past 72 hours. 3 days. The alien ship had been there for 3 days, silent and watchful. Every attempt at communication had failed. The Intrepid was one of 5 military vessels sent to investigate, positioned at a safe distance while diplomatic channels remained open. "Communications, try again," Allison ordered. Communications Officer Daniel Wright nodded and sent another standard greeting package, mathematical sequences followed by simple language patterns and images of human life. The same message had been transmitted hourly since first contact. "Still no response, Commander," Daniel reported after several minutes. Allison frowned, her dark eyes fixed on the alien vessel. Something about its silence felt deliberate, calculating. The bridge crew worked quietly around her, each person aware of the historic nature of their mission. "Captain on deck," someone called out. Everyone stood at attention as Captain William Foster entered the bridge. A veteran of the Mars conflicts, Foster was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much warfare. "At ease," he said, moving to stand beside Allison. "Any developments, Commander Hayes?" "No, sir. They're receiving our transmissions but choosing not to respond." The captain nodded slowly. "The other ships report the same. The Washington and the Beijing are maintaining position on the far side. The Johannesburg and the New Delhi are holding, at points north and south of the ecliptic, a strategic formation, ensuring that Earth's representatives could observe the alien ship from all angles. Standard protocol for an unknown situation." "What's your assessment, Commander?" Captain Foster asked quietly. Allison considered her words carefully. "Their technology is clearly advanced beyond ours, sir. The energy readings we're detecting suggest propulsion systems at least a century ahead of our capabilities. Their hull material doesn't match anything in our database. And the fact that they appeared without triggering any of our long-range sensors suggests they have stealth technology we can't counter. So why are they just sitting there?" Before Allison could answer, an alarm blared across the bridge. "Captain!" Sensor Officer Lisa Green's voice rose with urgency. "Energy spike from the alien vessel. Shields up. Battle stations." Foster ordered immediately. The crew moved with practiced efficiency as the Intrepid's defensive systems came online. On the main screen, the alien ship began to glow with an eerie purple light. "They're charging weapons," Lisa reported, her fingers flying over her console. "Energy signature is unlike anything in our—" She never finished her sentence. A brilliant beam of light shot from the alien vessel, not toward the Intrepid, but past it. The beam continued across the solar system, reaching the Jovian moon Europa in seconds. "My God," someone whispered. On the tactical display, the research outpost on Europa, home to 200 scientists studying the moon's subsurface ocean, simply vanished. Where the facility had stood was now a smoking crater visible even from their distant position. "The outpost is gone, sir," Lisa said, her voice hollow. "No survivors detected." Captain Foster's face hardened. "Target their weapons array, prepare to fire." "Sir," Allison said quickly, "their technology is far superior to ours. A direct confrontation would be—" Another alarm interrupted her. 3 smaller vessels had detached from the main alien ship and were moving with impossible speed toward the other Earth ships. "The Beijing is under attack," Daniel called out from communications. "The Washington as well." The tactical display told a grim story. The smaller alien craft moved with precision, firing weapons that cut through Earth's most advanced shields like paper. The Beijing exploded in a ball of flame. The Washington managed to fire a volley of missiles before it too was destroyed. "The Johannesburg is retreating," Lisa reported. "The New Delhi is moving to intercept the alien fighters." "Captain," Allison said urgently, We need to withdraw. We have to get this information back to Earth. Foster hesitated only a moment before nodding. You're right. Earth needs to know what we're facing. Helm, set course for Earth, maximum speed, communications. Send everything we've recorded on a tight beam transmission. As the Intrepid turned away from the battle, the main screen showed the New Delhi's brave but futile stand. The Earth ship managed to destroy one of the alien fighters before the remaining two tore it apart. The Johannesburg is hit, Lisa called out. Their engines are disabled. Can we help them? Foster asked. Tactical Officer Ryan Martinez shook his head. Not without being destroyed ourselves, sir. It was the hardest kind of decision, the kind that haunted a captain's dreams. But William Foster had not survived 3 wars by making emotional choices. Continue retreat, he ordered, his voice tight. Full power to engines and rear shields. As the Intrepid accelerated away, the alien vessels did not pursue. They returned to their mothership as if the destruction of 4 Earth vessels was nothing, more than a minor exercise. They could have destroyed us all immediately, Allison said quietly to the captain. This was a demonstration. Foster nodded grimly. They're showing us their power. They expect us to surrender when they reach Earth. But they've made a mistake, Allison replied, watching as the alien ship grew smaller on the rear view screen. They've given us time to prepare. 3 days later, the Intrepid reached Earth, carrying crucial information about the invaders, a species that would later be named the Kordathi. Commander Hayes's report sparked immediate mobilization of all human military forces. What the aliens didn't understand was that humans were not merely another spacefaring race. They were descendants of apex predators who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare against themselves. The Kordathi had made a critical miscalculation. By destroying the Europa outpost and the 4 ships, they thought they were demonstrating their overwhelming power. Instead, they had united humanity against a common threat and revealed their tactical thinking. And now, Earth was preparing for a fight unlike any the Kordathi had ever experienced. Dr. Samuel Carter had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were red-rimmed as he stared at the holographic display, showing the sensor readings from the Intrepid. The data was incredible, unlike anything human scientists had ever seen before. Brandgu, the secure laboratory beneath the Pentagon hummed with activity as dozens of researchers worked to understand the alien technology. More coffee, Dr. Carter? Samuel looked up to see his assistant Natalie Fisher holding out a steaming mug. He accepted it gratefully. Thanks. Any updates from the biology team? Natalie nodded. They've completed the analysis of the debris samples from the destroyed alien fighter. You were right. They're silicon-based life forms. This confirmed Samuel's theory. The aliens, now officially designated as the Kordathi, were fundamentally different from humans at a biological level. Their neural systems, their cellular structure, even their concept of time would be alien in the truest sense of the word. The Joint Chiefs are assembling in 30 minutes, Natalie reminded him. They'll want your preliminary findings. Samuel nodded, gathering his notes. The fate of Earth might depend on what he had discovered in these 3 sleepless days. The briefing room was filled with the highest-ranking military officials from around the world. The Kordathi threat had accomplished something unprecedented, complete, global cooperation. Old enemies now sat side by side, united by a common danger. General Laura Rodriguez, head of the United Earth Defense Force, called the meeting to order. Her sharp features showed no sign of the pressure she must have been feeling. Dr. Carter, you have the floor, she said. Samuel stood and moved to the center of the room. The holographic projector activated, showing a 3-dimensional model of the Kordathi ship. Thank you, General, he began. What I'm about to share is based on the data collected by the Intrepid before its return to Earth. Let me start with the most important discovery. The Kordathi are silicon-based life forms, not carbon-based like us. He paused to let this sink in. Their neural processes are significantly faster than ours. They think and react at speeds we would consider superhuman. However, their thought patterns are extremely linear. They appear to operate on pure logic, with minimal capacity for intuitive thinking. Admiral Patrick Nelson, a veteran naval commander with over 40 years of service, leaned forward. That explains their battle tactics. When they attacked our ships, they used textbook maneuvers, perfect formations, optimal firing solutions. But once the New Delhi did something unexpected, ramming one of their fighters, they seemed momentarily confused. Exactly. Samuel nodded. And that brings me to my second major finding. Based on the cultural and historical data we've decoded from their transmissions, there's no evidence of internal conflict in their history. They've evolved as a unified species. The room fell silent as the implications of this became clear. You're saying they've never fought wars against themselves? General Rodriguez asked. Precisely, Samuel replied. They understand conquest. They've conquered 17 other worlds before reaching Earth. But those were all against species that surrendered after witnessing demonstrations of Kordathi firepower. None put up significant resistance. None were human. He clicked to the next image, a complex diagram showing Kordathi's social structures. Their society is completely hierarchical. Each individual knows its exact place. There's no concept of rebellion, civil war, or even minor insurgency in their history. They fight as a unified force because they've never experienced anything else. Admiral Nelson stroked his chin thoughtfully. So they've never faced guerrilla warfare. They've never had to deal with asymmetric tactics or unconventional strategies. Never, Samuel confirmed. And most importantly, they've never fought an enemy that adapts quickly. In every previous conquest, their superior technology was enough. Show overwhelming force, destroy a few targets, and wait for surrender. General Rodriguez stood up, her mind clearly racing with possibilities. That's their weakness. They've never faced an enemy that doesn't fight by the rules. And humans, Samuel added, have been breaking the rules of warfare for our entire history. The room buzzed with new energy as military leaders began to see a way forward. The Kordathi might have superior technology, but humans had something perhaps more valuable: creativity born from millennia of fighting other humans. How long until they reach Earth? Asked General Rodriguez. Based on their current speed, 10 days, Samuel replied. They're being deliberate, stopping at each planet along the way. They've already established bases on Mars and Venus. They're thorough, Admiral Nelson noted, moving methodically through the system. And arrogant, added General Rodriguez. They think we'll be like the others, that we'll see their power and surrender. She turned to the assembled military leaders. We need to show them how wrong they are. I want unconventional warfare plans from every command. Forget standard military doctrine. Give me the craziest, most unpredictable strategies you can think of. As the meeting adjourned, Samuel found himself walking alongside Admiral Nelson toward the exit. Will it be enough? Samuel asked quietly. Their technology is so far beyond ours. Nelson's weathered face broke into a slight smile. Technology isn't everything in war, Doctor. Do you know why humans became the dominant species on Earth? Our intelligence, I suppose. Partly. But mostly it's because we're the most adaptable. We're not the strongest, fastest, or toughest. But we change. We learn. We improvise. The Admiral paused at the door. The Kordathi have conquered 17 worlds, but they've never met humans before. They have no idea what they're in for. As Samuel returned to his laboratory, he found new purpose in his work. The Kordathi saw humans as just another conquest, another inferior species to be dominated by their superior technology and perfect battle formations. What they didn't understand was that humans were different. Humans had been fighting wars against themselves since the dawn of their existence. They had developed strategies and counter-strategies, had learned deception and surprise, had mastered the art of beating superior forces through creativity and determination. The Kordathi were about to learn a painful lesson. Never underestimate a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history trying to outsmart itself. And as the alien fleet drew closer to Earth day by day, humanity prepared, a welcome unlike anything the Kordathi had ever experienced. The Montana wilderness was silent except for the occasional call of a bird. Snow covered the ground and tall pine trees stood like silent guardians across the landscape. In this peaceful setting, Major Olivia Bennett lay perfectly still beneath a white camouflage blanket, watching the valley below through high-powered binoculars. Beside her, Private First Class Eric Johnson checked the special device in his pack for the 5th time. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. "They're right on schedule," Olivia whispered. In the valley below, a group of Kordathi soldiers moved in perfect formation. Their tall, angular bodies were protected by shimmering armor that reflected the sunlight. Each alien carried what looked like an advanced rifle, and they moved with mechanical precision through the snow. The Kordathi had arrived on Earth 3 days ago, establishing ground bases in remote areas across the planet. This patrol was from the base they had built just 20 miles away where a mining facility once stood. "They always take the exact same route," Eric noted quietly. "Same time, same pattern every day." Olivia nodded. The aliens' predictability was their greatest weakness. They had no concept of changing routines to avoid ambush because they had never needed to. On the 17 worlds they had conquered, before Earth, no species had resisted after the initial demonstration of Kordathi power. But humans were different. "Ready the package," Olivia ordered. Eric nodded, carefully removing the device from his pack. It looked like a small silver disc, no bigger than a dinner plate. Dr. Carter and his team had created it based on the data from the Intrepid. Unlike a conventional electromagnetic pulse weapon, this one was calibrated specifically to the frequency of Kordathi technology, leaving human equipment unaffected. The plan was called Operation Trojan Horse. Across the globe, similar scenes were playing out as human forces observed Kordathi movements and prepared their response. The aliens, accustomed to enemies who surrendered immediately, had been careless. They didn't sweep areas for human technology, didn't vary their patrol routes, didn't consider that they might be watched. "They're entering the target zone," Olivia said, watching through her binoculars as the alien patrol moved into the narrow part of the valley. Eric activated the EMP device. A small green light began to pulse. "Armed and ready, Major." Olivia clicked her radio twice, a signal to the other teams positioned around the valley. 2 clicks came back from each. Everyone was in position. "Execute," she said simply. Eric pressed the central button on the device. There was no visible effect, no sound, nothing to indicate that anything had happened. But in the valley below, the Kordathi patrol suddenly stopped moving. Their weapons flickered and went dark. Their communication devices failed. For the first time, the perfect formation broke as the aliens looked at their malfunctioning equipment in confusion. "Phase 2, Olivia ordered into her radio. From hidden positions around the valley, other human soldiers activated similar devices, creating an electromagnetic fence that trapped the Kordathi patrol in the center. The aliens tried to retreat, but found their path blocked as more of their technology failed. Olivia watched calmly as the trap closed. The Kordathi were not supposed to die here today. That wasn't the plan. This was about gathering intelligence, about learning the enemy's response to unexpected situations. "Begin broadcast," she said. Eric activated another device, this one sending carefully crafted false communications to the Kordathi patrol. The aliens heard what they thought were orders from their commanders, telling them to proceed to coordinates that would lead them far from their base into an area where humans could capture them for study. The confusion in the Kordathi patrol was visible even from a distance. Their perfect order had dissolved into uncertainty. Some argued with others, pointing in different directions. Without their technology, without clear orders, they were lost. "They're splitting up," Eric observed. "Just like the psychologists predicted." Olivia nodded. "They don't know how to handle conflicting information. They've never needed to question orders before." Similar scenes were happening across the planet. Kordathi forces were being fed false information, led into harmless traps, studied and confused rather than engaged directly. It wasn't a conventional war strategy. It was psychological, warfare on a scale the aliens couldn't comprehend. In orbit above Earth, the situation was equally unusual. Admiral Nelson watched from the bridge of the newly commissioned defense carrier Defiance as the tactical display showed thousands of small signals, human forces surrounding Kordathi positions worldwide. "Begin Phase 2, Nelson ordered. Throughout the solar system, human forces executed their asymmetric warfare strategy. Unmanned vessels on suicide courses forced enemy ships to waste energy on minor threats. Solar mirrors redirected intense light to blind Kordathi sensors. Communication centers broadcast contradictory orders on Kordathi frequencies. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't meant to be. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something more valuable: creativity born from millennia of fighting other humans. "Sir, the Kordathi fleet is breaking formation," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes, now serving as Nelson's second-in-command after her promotion. "They're responding to our decoys. Their main battle group is splitting up." Nelson nodded with satisfaction. "They're following standard response protocols, just as we predicted. The human strategy wasn't to meet the Kordathi head-on. That would be suicide given the aliens' technological advantage. Instead, they were fighting the way humans had always fought against superior forces, using deception, guerrilla tactics, and psychological warfare. "Launch the next wave of drones," Nelson ordered. Across the system, thousands of small unmanned craft began moving toward Kordathi positions. Each drone broadcast signals that made it appear to be a much larger vessel. Some carried small nuclear devices not powerful enough to destroy the massive alien ships, but perfect for creating electromagnetic disturbances that would confuse Kordathi sensors. "They're targeting the drones," Hayes reported, "ignoring our actual attack vessels." Nelson smiled grimly. "They can't distinguish between the real threat and the distraction. They've never needed to." On the tactical display, the once perfect Kordathi formation had dissolved into chaos. Ships moved in unpredictable patterns, firing at shadows, wasting energy and ammunition on decoys. Meanwhile, specialized human strike teams used the confusion to approach key Kordathi vessels. Their mission wasn't to destroy, that would be impossible, but to attach small devices to the alien ships' hulls. Devices that would collect data, jam communications, and further disrupt the enemy's coordination. "The Kordathi have never faced an enemy who refuses to fight by the rules," Nelson said quietly. "They don't know how to respond." As the battle unfolded across the solar system, Earth's forces continued their unconventional strategy. They never engaged directly. They never matched force with force. Instead, they confused, misled, and frustrated the aliens at every turn. The Kordathi had conquered 17 worlds, but they had never encountered anything like humanity. They had never faced an enemy that viewed warfare as an art form, who had practiced it against themselves for thousands of years. They were about to learn why humans were truly dangerous. Fleet Commander Zorth-Ka of the Kordathi Expansion Force stared at the data display with what humans might recognize as frustration. His tall, angular form towered over the other officers on the bridge of the command vessel. The shimmering blue patterns on his skin, normally calm and ordered, flickered with chaotic pulses. "The humans continue to use deception and misdirection," reported his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vextor. "They do not engage directly, but attack supply lines and communication nodes." Zorth-Ka's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among his kind. By all logical calculations, the humans should have surrendered after the destruction of their lunar defense base 3 weeks ago. That was the pattern the Kordathi had seen on 17 other worlds. Show overwhelming force, destroy key installations, and wait for the inevitable surrender. But the humans had not surrendered. They had scattered into small units, abandoning conventional military doctrine. They refused to mass their forces where the Kordathi could destroy them with superior firepower. Instead, they struck at unexpected locations, disappeared before the Kordathi could respond, and left confusion in their wake. "Our flagship in the southern hemisphere reports more false signals," Vextor continued. "Their sensors detect hundreds of human vessels, but when our ships arrive at the coordinates, nothing is there." Zorth-Ka felt an unfamiliar sensation, something like uncertainty. The Kordathi had always relied on overwhelming force and technological superiority. Their tactics had been perfected through simulations, not actual combat against a determined enemy. The High Council demands an explanation for our lack of progress, Vextor added. The conquest of this world should have been completed within 5 cycles. We are now at 15 cycles with no end in sight. For the first time in his long career, Zorthka did not have a clear answer. The humans were not fighting like any species the Kordathi had encountered before. They seemed to have no central command structure to target, no predictable patterns to exploit. Meanwhile, on the UEDF command carrier Defiance, orbiting in the shadow of Earth's moon, psychologist Dr. Grace Martinez briefed the senior staff on her latest findings. The Kordathi have no concept of psychological warfare, she explained to the assembled officers. Their species evolved through cooperation rather than competition. They don't understand deception as we do. Captain Allison Hayes, now promoted, after her successful infiltration of a Kordathi communications hub, nodded in agreement. They can't adapt to our constantly changing tactics because they've never needed to. Dr. Martinez advanced to the next slide in her presentation. It showed brain scans of the captured Kordathi soldiers from the Montana operation. Their neural pathways are fascinating, she continued. When presented with contradictory information, they experience what we might call a cognitive shutdown. Their minds literally cannot process information that doesn't fit their established patterns. Admiral Nelson leaned forward with interest. So, when we feed them false data and change our tactics constantly, it creates what amounts to a system overload, Dr. Martinez confirmed. They're literally incapable of the kind of adaptive thinking that humans take for granted. This explained so much about the strange behavior of the Kordathi forces over the past weeks. Their once perfect formations had dissolved into disorder. Their ships moved in confused patterns, often firing at empty space or chasing sensor ghosts. What about their command structure? General Rodriguez asked. Can we exploit that? Dr. Martinez nodded eagerly. Their hierarchy is absolute. Lower ranks never question orders from above. By feeding false commands into their communication network, we can create complete confusion. Captain Hayes stood up, her expression thoughtful. That explains the success of Operation Echo. When we broadcast contradictory orders on their frequencies, entire battalions of their ground forces ended up marching in circles. As the human leaders continued their discussion, across the solar system, the Kordathi forces fell deeper into disarray. Their command ships, once the center of perfect coordination, now issued conflicting orders. Supply vessels found their designated rendezvous points empty. Ground forces reported seeing enemies that weren't there. The latest reports show Kordathi ships firing on each other near Mars, Lieutenant Daniel Wright reported, studying the tactical display. They can't distinguish between our decoy signals and their own vessels. Admiral Nelson nodded with grim satisfaction. Continue the strategy. Keep them confused. Don't let them establish any pattern they can recognize. The human approach to warfare was something the Kordathi simply could not comprehend. In their long history of conquest, they had developed tactics based on overwhelming force against enemies who fought conventionally. They expected direct confrontation, open battles, and clear front lines. Instead, they got ghost fleets that disappeared when approached. They got contradictory intelligence reports. They got communication systems that suddenly broadcast in human languages, or played strange music, or fell silent altogether. Sir, Captain Hayes said quietly to Admiral Nelson as they studied the latest battle reports. The Kordathi are starting to withdraw from some of their forward positions. They're consolidating their forces around their main command ships. Nelson nodded. They're doing what any species would do when confused. They're returning to their core protocols, pulling back, regrouping, but that's exactly what we want. Because it makes them predictable again, Hayes realized. Exactly. And predictable enemies can be defeated no matter how advanced their technology. As the human forces continued their guerrilla campaign, the Kordathi became increasingly disorganized. Their perfect formations broke down completely as human attacks came from unexpected vectors. Their command structure, unused to battlefield adaptations, became rigid and slow to respond. In the Montana wilderness, Major Bennett and her team watched as another Kordathi patrol fell into disarray after receiving contradictory orders. "They're just standing there," Eric observed through his binoculars. "They don't know what to do without clear instructions." Olivia nodded. "That's their weakness. They've never had to think for themselves in combat situations." Across Earth and throughout the solar system, the pattern repeated. The Kordathi, faced with an enemy who refused to fight according to recognized patterns, simply did not know how to respond. Their technological advantage meant nothing against an enemy who never engaged directly, who used deception as a primary weapon, who treated warfare as an art form rather than a mathematical equation. The invaders had never faced an enemy who had spent thousands of years practicing warfare against themselves. They had no defense against human unpredictability, and as the conflict entered its second month, Fleet Commander Zorth made an unprecedented decision. For the first time in the history of the Kordathi expansion force, he sent a message to the High Council recommending a diplomatic solution. The humans, he reported, could not be defeated through conventional means. They were too unpredictable, too adaptable, too willing to abandon all rules of engagement. The species that had conquered 17 worlds had finally met its match. 6 months after the initial invasion, Fleet Commander Zorth stood before the Kordathi High Council via holographic transmission. His once pristine uniform was damaged in several places, and his normally composed demeanor showed visible signs of strain. The blue patterns on his skin pulsed with irregular rhythms, indicating extreme stress by Kordathi standards. "We have lost 60% of our invasion force," he reported, his voice steady despite his obvious discomfort. "The humans do not fight with honor or predictability. They use methods that defy all military logic." The 7 members of the High Council sat in a semicircle, their tall forms perfectly still. They had never faced a situation like this before. In their 1,000-year history of expansion, the Kordathi had never failed to conquer a target world. "Explain these human methods," commanded the Supreme Leader, the eldest of the Council. Zorth gestured, and a series of battle recordings appeared in the air between them. They showed human forces using tactics that no Kordathi commander would ever consider. Ships that appeared on sensors, but didn't exist in reality. Ground forces that attacked, then disappeared into tunnel systems. Communication networks that somehow broadcast false orders that sounded exactly like legitimate Kordathi commands. "They do not mass their forces where we can destroy them," Zorth explained. "They do not protect their infrastructure as we expected. When we destroy one of their cities, they do not surrender. Instead, they adapt their tactics further." The Council members watched in silence as the recordings continued. One showed a small human vessel approaching a Kordathi cruiser. Instead of firing weapons, it simply attached a device to the hull and retreated. Hours later, the cruiser's systems began to malfunction, and its crew reported hearing human voices in their communication channels. "They use our own technology against us," Zorth continued. "They study our patterns and exploit them. Our predictability has become our greatest weakness." In another part of the solar system, the peace conference was being prepared. The neutral location chosen was Ceres, the largest object in the asteroid belt. The human delegation had already arrived, led by Admiral Nelson and General Rodriguez. They waited patiently in the hastily constructed meeting facility as the Kordathi representatives approached. "Do you think they'll actually negotiate?" Captain Hayes asked Admiral Nelson as they reviewed the proposed terms. "They don't have much choice," Nelson replied. "They can't beat us using their standard methods, and they don't know how to fight any other way." The doors opened, and the Kordathi delegation entered. Led by a representative of the High Council, they moved with the precise, measured steps characteristic of their species. Their eyes, 4 to each face, blinked in synchronized patterns as they took in the human representatives. "Welcome," Admiral Nelson said, standing to greet them. "We appreciate your willingness to discuss terms." The Kordathi Supreme Leader stepped forward. Unlike Zorth his uniform was pristine, his manner confident. But there was something new in his expression, something that humans might recognize as respect, or perhaps caution. How can your species wage war so efficiently? He asked, genuine curiosity in his multifaceted eyes. Your technology is inferior, your numbers smaller, yet you have decimated our forces. Admiral Nelson met the alien's gaze steadily. Because we've been practicing on ourselves for our entire history. We've fought more wars against our own kind than you've fought against all other species combined. A ripple of movement passed through. The Kordathi delegation, their equivalent of surprise. You have internal conflicts? The Supreme Leader asked, clearly struggling with the concept. Thousands of them, General Rodriguez added. Throughout our history, humans have fought each other constantly. We've developed countless strategies, counter-strategies, and counter-counter-strategies. We've learned how to fight enemies with superior technology or greater numbers. War is not a mathematical equation, continued Nelson. It's chaos, adaptation, and deception. These are concepts we understand intimately because we've used them against each other for millennia. The Kordathi Supreme Leader was silent for a long moment processing this information. Finally, he spoke. This explains much. The 17 species we conquered before encountering humans all fought as we do, with direct confrontation and clear patterns. None used the methods you describe. None had our history, Hayes said simply. The peace treaty was signed within the week. The terms were surprisingly generous from both sides. The Kordathi agreed to withdraw from the solar system and recognize Earth's sovereignty. Humans agreed not to pursue the retreating Kordathi forces and to establish diplomatic relations for potential future cooperation. As the alien fleet prepared to depart, Dr. Samuel Carter met with one of the Kordathi scientists, who had requested a cultural exchange. The alien was named Mevrin, and his curiosity about humans seemed genuine. Your species puzzles us greatly, Mevrin admitted. You fight with such skill, yet you seek peace. You could have continued to attack our forces as they retreated. Samuel smiled slightly. That's another thing about humans. We're not just good at fighting. We've also learned when to stop fighting. This concept of internal conflict, Mevrin continued, it seems inefficient, destructive. Yet you suggest it has made your species stronger. In a way, yes, Samuel acknowledged. It's forced us to adapt, to innovate, to think in ways your species never needed to. Your unity gave you stability, but our divisions gave us creativity. As the last Kordathi ship departed from Earth orbit, Captain Hayes stood with Dr. Carter on the observation deck of the rebuilt lunar base. Do you think they'll be back? She asked, watching the alien fleet shrink into the distance. Carter shook his head. Not as enemies. They're logical beings, and the logical conclusion is that humans are too dangerous to fight, but too valuable to ignore. Ironic, isn't it? Hayes mused. Our greatest weakness, our tendency toward conflict, turned out to be our greatest strength. Perhaps, Carter replied, watching the last Kordathi ship disappear into the darkness of space. But let's hope we can show them we're equally skilled at peace. In the following years, the relationship between humans and Kordathi evolved in unexpected ways. The aliens, fascinated by human adaptability, became valuable trading partners. They offered technological advancements in exchange for human art, literature, and philosophy, concepts their unified society had never developed fully. And throughout the galaxy, word spread of the strange, divided species called humans, the Yao, only species that had forced the mighty Kordathi to retreat. The only species that could win wars effortlessly, because they had been fighting wars against themselves since the beginning of their history. Earth was never invaded again.